Good morning. Greetings in Jesus' name this morning. Before we go any further, I don't know how many of you can see this. Isn't quite big enough for the ones in the back? No? Well, would that work? Huh? Does it matter? Huh?
Let him take a picture with his phone and then he can follow along.
Anyway, this is what it is. Yeah, I'm not sure where you should put it, Adley. Okay. Put it in front of Norman. No. Here. Anyway, before we go on, so it's basically a list of virtues and vices, right? And there's one virtue not on there, but it's something that is connected in so many ways, or the beginning of or if we lose it, it's the beginning of quite a few of those vices. And if we lose it, we can't have quite a few of these virtues. So I want you to think about it, see if you can come up with it. Just wait. Okay, so for those of you that can't see, we've got a list of virtues, and it's by no means exhaustive. I'm sure you could add some. And what we've got on there is humility, modesty, generosity, charity, kindness, gratitude, patience, compassion, chastity, purity, temperance, moderation, diligence, fervor, love, joy, peace, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, tenderheartedness, forgiving, hospitable, endurance, thankful, rejoicing. And on the other side of that, we've got vices: pride, arrogance, avarice, greed, envy, jealousy, wrath, anger, lust, impurity, gluttony, voracity, sloth, laziness, enmity, strife, stealing, drunkenness, carousing, falsehood, evil talk, slander, bitterness, frustrations, deceit, and rebellion. I just thought of this other one that I wrote down. It's debatable, I guess. Depends how people view it. Depression. Anyway. Yeah, for sure you wouldn't put it on the virtue side, but I guess it depends on how you view depression, like whether it's a spiritual thing or whether it's can be explained completely in a scientific way. Anyway, so yeah, I'm ready for suggestions on what you think I left out of there that has so much to do with so many others there. Is that not on there? Yes, it isn't. But no, that's not what I was thinking. So they're merciful. I don't have a green pencil, but we got that on here, yeah. Wasn't thinking of that either. Yeah. Well, yeah, anyway. I didn't want to get into a debate about depression, but we could talk about that someday, for sure. It is, I believe. No? Oh. See, I said it isn't exhaustive. Yeah, if you have a thought. No, not that either. No, there's just... Go ahead. Well, it could go either way. If you lose this thing, then... Right. Okay. Let me read this little story for you. A godly child had a ring given him by his mother, and he greatly prized it. But on one occasion he unhappily lost his ring, and he cried bitterly. But recapturing his composure, he stepped aside and prayed. After which his sister laughingly said to him, "Brother, what is the good of praying about a ring? Will praying bring back your ring?" "Perhaps not," said he. "But praying has done this for me. It has made me quite willing to do without the ring if it is God's will. And is not that almost as good as having it?" Contentment. Thus faith quiets us by resignation as a babe is hushed in his mother's bosom. Faith makes us quite willing to do without the mercy which once we prized. And when the heart is content to be without the outward blessing, it is as happy as it would be with it, for it is at rest. Now I can't reach up there. And as so often when I start or think of something, I start digging in, I think, but I can't do it justice in a couple of minutes, so this by no means will be an exhaustive anything. But I just want you to think about it. Just maybe you can start, maybe it can start something in your own mind, like if one is content, if we have contentment, how can we start feeling jealous or envying something a brother has, or coveting, which are all in the same boat? If we are content, how can we get angry over someone else, say? Which, I mean, we could put it in a row, maybe, like we lose our contentment, or we Maybe lust comes first. Then you lose your contentment, and you start envying someone else. I don't know which one comes first always, but so on and so forth. And then maybe you get bitter, and it causes strife, and so on and so forth. If you're content, yeah, and that would keep on leading to who knows what. I think, and I'm preaching to myself this morning. I haven't been as joyful in the past years that I think I should have been. Recently, I've been digging into myself and trying to figure out what's wrong. And I think I've come to that conclusion. Like maybe, like in the past, I'd say I've gone through seasons where I've been content with what the Lord has dealt me, and I think maybe I let that go somewhere along the line, and has caused all kinds of other things. So, a confession, a preaching to myself. I'm still working on it. So, bitterness, anger, frustrations, rebellion can lead to others, drunkenness, carousing, all kinds, but they're all connected. Like so if we lose our contentment, we're gonna lose other things on this side. It'll be hard to love, or maybe impossible. It'll for sure be hard to have joy and rejoice in any situation, and so on and so forth. So, hope. Yeah. So if you lose your contentment, like how can you have hope? You mean? That's one of those like anger. You could kind of argue with anger, like so there's a certain kind of anger, right? Maybe. And the same with the even contentment, like so. Yeah, we don't want to be content with sin in our life, but that's not what we're talking about. But being content with what the Lord deals us, what our life is, and what we're given day by day. I sure believe so. And hope for better things, as far as growing in Christ and in His ways, without being discontent. Yeah. Anyway, so just try to wrap your mind around that if you can.
I would say material things until that
Yeah, right. Which is vices. So that's what we're like we can't be content with any of the vices in our life.
Timothy 6,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I was going to bring that verse up next if nobody guessed contentment before. Like, so it goes with godliness to cause great gain. Contentment. And Paul wrote in other places as well. Like I have learned in whatsoever state I am therewith to be content. I have learned. Oh, I'll just find it. I've learned to abound, or to. How does it go, Robert? Yeah.
I have learned to be both abounding and
Yeah. Yep. Anyway, so other than that, I've got just some short sayings here that some of them first off you may think they don't have anything to do with contentment, but I am content with whatever entertainment I meet with. That must be the spirit with all who take journeys with me. This was John Wesley. If a dinner ill-dressed, a hard bed, a poor room, a shower of rain, or a dirty road will put them out of humor, being his traveling companions or those he lives with, it lays a burden upon me greater than all the rest put together. By the grace of God, I never fret. I repine at nothing. I am discontented with nothing. And to have persons at my ear fretting and murmuring at everything is like tearing the flesh off my bones. It is not so, this is a different one from J. Taylor. It is not so much the greatness of our troubles as the littleness of our spirit which makes us complain. Live near to God, and so all things will appear to you little in comparison with eternal realities. You can no more blame your circumstances for your character than you can the mirror for your looks. Well, maybe you could get a deceitful mirror, Brett, but that wouldn't help you any. Well, it does, but circumstances also aren't, like true contentment doesn't have to do with your circumstances. Or you could, like Paul, learn to be content in whatever state you are. If we find true peace and contentment. Right. Yeah. And that was basically the title of that first little story I read. I didn't read it, the title, because I didn't want to give it away, but resonation, the root of peace. Love looks through a telescope, envy through Anybody want to finish it? A microscope. The basis of friendship is forgetting what you give and remembering what you receive. Charity gives itself rich, covetousness hoards itself poor. How wonderful to be content and say, I desire nothing more than God has given. No, some are unanimous and varying other. Consider how much more you often suffer from your anger and grief than from those very things for which you are angry and grieved. Think about that one. Consider how much more you often suffer from your anger and grief than from the very things for which you are angry and grieved. So something happens that causes you to be angry and grieved, and in the end, you suffer way more from your anger and grief than you do from those circumstances. Yeah. When you get so that it takes great big troubles to trouble you and little things to make you happy, then you are on the right track. What does anxiety do? I don't think I even have anxious or anxiety up there, but it could be. It does not empty tomorrow of its sorrow, but it empties today of its... Anybody want to take a guess? Could be, that's not what's here, but strength. Strength. So it does not empty tomorrow of its sorrow, but it empties today of its strength. It does not make you escape the evil. It makes you unfit to cope with it if it comes. Anxiety is a word of unbelief or unreasoning dread. We have no right to allow it. Full faith in God puts it to rest. We can't be blind to other people's faults, but we can be infinitely tender, comparing their worst with our worst, and not their worst with our best. Anyway, I think I'll wrap it up. Just one more little story here. Hopefully an old Scotch woman, a good sermon. An old Scotch woman said to her pastor, "That was a grand sermon you preached last Lord's Day. Seeking to test her sincerity, he asked, "And what was the text?" "Oh, minister," she replied, "I don't know the text or the words." But I came home and I took the false bottom out of my pec measure. Was that a good sermon? Okay, so I'll just read the story again. So an old Scotch woman said to her pastor, "That was a grand sermon you preached last Lord's Day." So the pastor, seeking to test her sincerity, he asked her, "And what was the text?" And this was her reply, "Oh, minister, I don't know the text or the words. But," and here's the key, "I came home and I took the false bottom out of my pec measure." Or say, it's a unit of measure, so it could have been a bushel basket. So I took the false bottom out of my bushel basket. Was that a good sermon? Even though she couldn't remember anything that was preached or the text, she knew that something happened. She went home and she took deceit out of her life, right? In her false bottom in the pec measure. In other words, like, there's probably many sermons in our past that we've heard, or things brothers shared, and we couldn't go back and tell you what or where or whatever, but that helped us change things. Wouldn't that be the measure of a good sermon? Anyway, Lord bless you. Corrections, comments, additions, feel free to comment.
Thank you, Brother Leroy. That's a really good reminder. And I feel like it's tied to other things that I think about a lot and wrestle with a lot. Like one thing in particular, while you were sharing, my mind kind of kept coming back to that prayer a lot of people have on their walls called the Serenity Prayer. And it, is something to the effect of like, "Lord, grant me wisdom to change the things I can, or the courage, how's that go? Lord, grant me the courage to change the things I can," and something like contentment. I know wisdom to accept the things I can, wisdom to know the difference. Wisdom to know the difference between the two, the things you can change and the things you can't. And I feel like there's a truth in that thing, and yet it's missing something. Like, I suppose somebody with the means who got tired of their Formica countertops and decided to go with granite is missing it somehow. And that's like all tied to contentment. Yet, like, if there was a guy that had a hole in his roof and he just, he didn't have the skills or the wisdom to get up there, and he just kind of sealed off that part of the house, and he just thought, well, it's not okay. Like, it's going to breed black mold. It's going to ruin the rest of the house. But if he could change that, if he had the means to change it, he'd do it. And if not, he'd be just okay with it, raining in whenever it rains. Maybe that's a little bit closer to the heart of contentment. And I guess sort of maybe my thought was at the heart of it is trying to discern the difference between needs and wants. And anyway, I really appreciated it. Thank you, Brother Leroy.
Yes, thank you, Leroy. It looks like a fair bit of study went into that, and we appreciate that. As depression and as many of those other things are a revelation of a deeper issue, and you shared your own testimony of that. Is when these things pop up, there's things that aren't right, the red side starts popping up, it's a indicator of a problem back somewhere. And so if nothing else, this sermon should invoke in us all a deep soul searching. If we are content, are we content with godliness? Or are we content with our laziness? Are we content with our gluttony? Are we content with our rebellion? You know, what are we content with? Let's each one of us examine ourselves very deeply. Do we have godliness with contentment, or have we just become content with our vices? And apply ourselves. It's a call to each one to examine himself very deeply, and see what is the root of our contentment, and what is the root of any discontent we might have. I don't see us as a by and large discontented people, so our call may be more to examine what we are being content with, and I can certainly do some of that in my life. Thank you.
Amen, Brother Leroy. I know you said that this is Leroy's message. It's a searching of your own heart, but it searches all of our hearts too. It's not just you, brother. It's a good search, take inventory for all our innermost thoughts. And by the way, that last Scotsman riddle about the peck and the false bottom, to me, I thought it was a brain teaser. Like Brett, he couldn't figure it out either. It was supposed to be simple, you know, deceit, but I guess that's the obvious part. But I was racking my brain trying to figure out what this false bottom was. So it went over my head, and it was so simple. But yeah, and contentment is Will and Max. Well, all, you know, you didn't use the verse, but it goes in there. With food and clothing, with this we should be content. Anything else beyond that is what? Luxury. It's luxury, really. If we more than food and contentment. And so we're not in Africa, we're not in Bangladesh or Honduras. So things that I'm content. I think of Helen Keller. She wrote that, the blind lady, most of her life. She wrote a little short essay called "If I Only Had 3 Days to See," and what that would do. If she had just 3 days to see, and we have our eyes, and we take for granted the gift of sight. Or I think of the people of contentment in prison, the Jews in the concentration camps. They were starved to death, and we're not starving to death in this country or anything like that. Or how about if we have no fellowship? No fellowship, if we're on a desert island or a prison, we couldn't have any fellowship to like-minded brothers to love. We have our assurance before God when we love the brotherhood. And one of the things, and I thank you for all you brethren, but I'll confess a thing that I searched my heart recently, and you know, it should have been obvious, but now and then you hear of a shooting, and it happens all the time. Mass murderers, someone will go into a shopping mall or a school and shoot 7 or 8 people, and then it says, and then the police killed the shooter. And my first gut reaction is, right on, they got him, he's out of there. And how wicked and how sinful that thought is. Vengeance is the Lord. How does God say it, both in the Old and New Testament? I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked. It's repeated both in the Old and New. And a gut reaction is when I hear that, you know, they say, hey, but the shooter got killed too, because he took away 7 or 8 lives of innocent people. And then I'm saying, it's a sinful thought to wish, yeah, now he's out of there too. And we shouldn't, at least I shouldn't, never, vengeance is Lord's, and always pray for the wicked and love our enemies and the people. Whether it's Saddam Hussein, Osama bin Laden, or Adolf Hitler, we should never rejoice in the death of an evil person, because we all have sinned. The Lord be magnified.
Yeah, I also appreciated it, Brother Leroy. I think I've really been taking inventory of my heart this last week, and I feel like God put that on your heart to share for me. So I appreciate you being faithful to what he was leading you to do. I didn't really understand a whole lot of the story you shared, but I did take away one thing from it when he said, I stepped aside and composed myself and prayed. I thought that was really good. And then the song that Robert shared was just really touched me, Sweet Hour of Prayer. That was really something I needed to hear. Years ago I had this thought about that verse, godliness with contentment is great gain. And I might have tried to bring some things out, and some brothers might have thought, well, that's not what it's talking about. But so I just want to put that out there. I know when he's saying godliness with contentment is great gain, he might not be saying being content with godliness, but that was my thought. Like, when we're content with godliness, then we're in a really good place. When we're just content with godliness, and if we are content with godliness, then we don't really fall into the right side, red category, because we're content with loving our neighbor as ourselves. We're content with loving our enemies. We're content with little. We're content with humility. We're content with being patient when there's things frustrating us, or we're content with just doing the godly thing. There's a great gain, and I think I've been falling short of that. I've been not focusing on that. And that's some of the things I'm finding in the warehouse of my heart this week. You know, I'm going through all these boxes, and I'm like, whoa. I just want to put that out there. I'm kind of acknowledging some things. I confess, maybe I have been a little bit more frustrated. God help me. Yeah, but I really appreciated the message. I appreciate that God makes life awkward sometimes, like he doesn't make it easy. He makes it real uncomfortable, but that's such a blessing. We should never take that for granted. Lord bless you all.
Yeah, I was, what Brett shared really got me thinking, and I feel like that's the heart of it, the difference between the spiritual and the physical. And one thing I often think of is we don't want to apply the rules to physical things to spiritual things. With regard to physical things, we suffer loss with content. We suffer loss with contentment and forgiveness. But with regard to spiritual things, we should not be content. With regard to physical things, we don't lay up treasure, but with regard to spiritual things, we do lay up treasure. So one of the things I think Jesus does is just kind of he didn't take away warfare. He just changed what we're warring for. He didn't take away this thing within a man or within a human, within a person that wants to labor for riches. He just changed what the riches are that we're laboring for. And so and I thought of how they work in how the two things work. The temporal things and eternal things, carnal things and spiritual things, how they kind of you either get one or the other, like in those places where Jesus said, like, if do it this way, because if you do it this other way, then the Pharisees, they have their temporary reward, but if you do it this way, then you'll have eternal reward. And I think what Max was saying, like the difference between what you can and can't do. Like I don't think I can just sit and like want to be more patient, and that makes me more patient. But I think the more I am content, and the contentment would lead me to give. If I'm content with having few physical things, if I'm content with just rather than content, if my goal is not physical things, but my goal is, that God is pleased with me, and that God has pleasure with me. So I'm willing to give up my physical things. I think giving up my time, giving up my possessions, the things that Jesus taught leads to. I think that's how we get when we lose those riches, we gain these other riches anyway. I thought that was what, and I think what Will was saying, that similar things. I don't want to be content with my state of patience. I want to be more patient. I don't want to be content with the state of love that I have. I want to be challenging that and growing in that with my generosity and how much I think of others, and my conviction against sin. I'm not content with those things. The spiritual things I want to grow. I want to lay them up. I want barns full of those things.
Yeah, let's see if I can remember all the thoughts that I had. Yeah, first of all, Brother Leroy, yeah, thank you. Really, really important message. Oh, thank you, brother. Keep me straight, brother. So, yeah, I think some thoughts that come to mind is, I think a lot of times in the pursuit of humility, which is a virtue on the left side, we can sometimes deceive ourselves to, we're confessing the stuff on the right side and we're feeling really godly because we're taking ownership of our sin, and look at Jesus talked about it right in the Gospels. And yeah, the Pharisee on the left side was like, he fasts and he does all this stuff, and so I don't think that's the kind of message that I think God wants us to see. Jesus says, as we know, it's enough for a disciple, it's enough for a student to be exactly like his teacher. And he says we have one teacher, the Christ, right? So the left side and all the virtues that are missing to their perfection is Jesus. And so that's the goal. So I think, and maybe some of y'all have thought this, well, it sounds like some of the things that people are saying, taking inventory and stuff and working on certain things. Like that's really what we need to do, break them down and just really attack certain ones we're weak on, and obviously different scriptures are going to help us in that pursuit and stuff. And so that was some thoughts I had. I guess one thought I said too, or what I was thinking too, and not trying to nitpick words or anything, but I think there's a huge difference between something that was said, here's a bad situation and it caused me to have this vice, versus this situation that happened that obviously God, like Job chapter 1, authorized Satan to bring upon us or whatever, and it tempted us and we made the choice to end up on the right side in that vice, rather than like all of these vices or virtues. We have choices, and if we don't have a choice, it really shouldn't be up there. So because this is what it comes down to, is self-government, temperance, self-control, and exercising the will of God. Because obviously when we're doing this stuff on the left side, God is smiling, he's pleased with us. We're doing this stuff on the right side, God is really wanting us to repent, and he doesn't want to destroy the wicked. And if we're humble, we can get some mercy, but if we keep pushing it, at some point he pulls the plug, as we see throughout the whole Bible. He does to different people, and it's enough for a student to become exactly like his teacher. So I'll just leave it there. One last little thought too is, I guess, was it mentioned, is one of the big differences that I've noticed from seeing how the early church thought versus how pretty much everybody today is everybody typically finds, and it has an element of humility to it, of taking ownership, but it's always humans, which leads to the idea of humans being inherently evil, as opposed to there's a spiritual fight that's going on. I mean, Jesus came here to overcome the devil, and he says, come follow me, and he'll lead us to overcome the devil in our own lives, which is getting us out of the right side into the left side. And yeah, when we overcome the things on the right side and we move to the left side, there is great joy in heaven, as Jesus said. Tons of angels rejoicing, and like Jesus says in Revelations, to him that overcomes, to him that has victory. I would argue that implies victory over the devil. I will give the right to eat from the tree of life and stuff. So.
help me.